It is exactly 100 years since events started in Fatima. And the first cycle of events, the preparation, isn't indifferent either. We have this strange angelic presence, which was apparently the angel of Portugal, an angel of peace. We have, therefore, the way that heaven prepares the way. That's kind of important also for us when we have to do with the Lord Jesus. The preparation part often doesn't happen. We crash into heaven as though it were just more of the same thing. So it's kind of important that we also learn that bit, that we need to calm down when we come into anything to do with God. He is a God who likes stillness. And then what happens? The following year we have these 6 apparitions of our Blessed Lady. They go, as it were, in crescendo. Eventually we have this big feast, the 13th of October, although actually liturgically it's feasted on the 13th of May when the cycle began. But this is the big one with regard to what happened visibly in front of 70,000 people, able also to be photographed. They were afraid. Do you remember what happened? What the miracle was, you little people? Did you hear about what actually happened?
It was the miracle of the sun.
Good, you're well informed. What happened?
The sun came down and then changed colours.
Well done, you learnt it all. And they were afraid. They thought that they were coming too, it was coming too close to them.
Yeah.
And they knew what that would mean. And some of them were crying out. Didn't it go very close to them and then go back again or something?
Yeah.
And the meaning is puzzling. Later on in time, when more is known than then with regard to science, people have thought, is it perhaps some kind of warning that something similar to the sun could one day damage us? Do you know, by any chance, something about how the sun works? What makes it hot? Do you know a little bit about physics? Tiny bit. Do you know what happens when they explode an atom bomb? Do you know what's actually going on?
Nothing touching an atom. Breaking an atom.
Exactly, you got it. What it is, there's a basic principle in physics that matter cannot be created or destroyed, but only changed in form. And with regard to what happens in nuclear physics, simply put, it's this. By disintegrating a certain amount of tiny matter, they can create a huge amount of energy, because that's what's happening. If you go down, 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 down in bits of matter, one gets to a situation where it's hardly matter at all, but forces. And some physicists will tell you that if you go down enough, you'll not actually find matter, but only forces. Because we don't know exactly how these things work way down on the level of atoms. It's a whole new field of investigation. But already, when they were starting to play around with atomic forces, they discovered that one can make a huge amount of energy by actually, apparently, upsetting the balance of matter. So it's something like that that's happening inside the sun. It's a continuous reaction. It's called fission. And there's a massive amount of energy and therefore heat coming out of this continuous changing of form inside the nuclear structure. So scientists have looked into that and said, look, maybe there's a hint there. Is Our Blessed Lady warning that down the line something like that is in danger of burning us up? Now, as one looks around the world, it's more than just a distant danger. It's very close to us in what could actually happen, and even in our generation, and even in the near future, if we have irresponsible people doing the wrong things in a hurried way. Nowadays, pressing buttons or sending commands, we have the power to make something like that go dreadfully wrong. We don't know, but it would make sense that possibly there is a warning there. We also have the fact that since that, we've had a vast number of interventions of our Blessed Lady over the planet, more than ever before in history. Again, it would suggest that heaven is looking down on us and trying to warn us. In the period when she was appearing in Fatima, it was a period of great trouble on earth. Do you remember what was going on at the time? What big event?
Oh, I forget it.
World
Forget
War.
what?
You should know, Leo. World War.
World War I.
That's right. And what was very special about that war, they call it the Great War. Do you know what makes it different from any other war that ever before had been fought? Who did it involve? Was it one nation? Well, by the end, who was involved? What do they call it?
World.
The World War. It was the first World War. Because of coalitions, other nations were being brought in. Now, then, of course, what happened was, do you remember how in the end they settled for what is called an armistice? That means a laying down of arms. And there was a treaty at Versailles, just outside Paris. And what happened was this: because the Germans had started it, they were heavily penalised, terribly penalised, money-wise, and it was a great humiliation. So as a result, eventually, they got out of that mess and they got their dignity back, and they were going to get back their dignity by arming themselves, and it led to what? In 1939.
War.
What's it called?
World War.
World War II. The whole world again was brought into it, and this time there was a big difference because they had more powerful arms. Whereas in the First World War it was essentially soldiers who were being killed physically in the trenches. In the Second World War it was already more intellectual. They could do a lot by pressing buttons and sending heavy bombs even over cities. So do you see how what has happened is this: Our Lady was concerned when she was appearing in 1917 about what was going on, and she was also warning these children, like yourself, about what was going on when these soldiers died. She was warning people that they were in danger of losing their souls because if they weren't praying, they weren't going to go to heaven, and she was showing the consequences. But also she was telling us more. She did give to understand, to Lucia especially, what was going to happen, because there would be further disruption because people weren't praying, and she warned that there would be a great light in the sky, and that when that was seen it would be a sign there was going to be the Second World War, which was going to be even worse because of the vast areas of cities involved. And it happened in 1938. They saw this bright red light, and I've heard about it from people. It was massively seen, and it made people shudder. And indeed, I heard that Hitler himself saw it and muttered to one of his generals, "It'll take a lot of blood to pull this one off." He knew what was in his mind. And so it was. Now, do you remember that she was trying to warn the world that they were in danger of this problem of contamination from what was starting already at that period, 1917, in Russia, atheism, a world without God. It would be contaminating the whole planet if they didn't obey heaven. Now, do you remember what Our Lady wanted to try to install on earth to protect that from heaven? What specific devotion did she actually ask for to prevent it happening? Can you remember? Well, what are you doing on the first Saturdays?
On Mass.
Yes, now that's part of something greater. Did you learn what it's part of?
It's part of Rosary.
Yes. So she was asking for these first Saturdays, 5 first Saturdays, to be set apart as moments of... Now, the word is reparation to her Immaculate Heart, which was upset what was going on earth. And she was asking, therefore, for the Rosary, which also she wanted actually every day. She asked that each time at Fatima for the Rosary every day, but on these first Saturdays, specifically, it was in reparation. And she wanted the world to have this devotion to her Immaculate Heart, and she also wanted something specific. She wanted the Pope and the Church in general, the bishops that is, in union with him, to do one specific thing. Now maybe you wouldn't know about this. Did you ever hear about what she asked for to save it from happening? Yes, Daddy's got it. The consecration of, well, the world and the Russia in particular, specifically Russia, to her Immaculate Heart. Now, this was before you were born, but I was still in the monastery in France at the time, and I'm going to tell you a story. So I used to be comfortably, Mammy included, and it was this which happened on the 25th of March 1984. Now first of all, what is the 25th of March? What feast is it?
Angel Gabriel.
Yes?
Annunciation.
Annunciation.
Glory was born on.
Ah! There we are. The little man was born on that feast. Isn't that great? We belong to Mary from the beginning. So, the angel Gabriel appeared and greeted her, and of course that was the beginning of the incarnation when the Lord came down to earth through her. And so, that was a Marian feast, and on that day, St. John Paul II, who was Pope, in union with all the bishops of the world, did that. And I remember our own abbot did it with him in union. It was Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. And it was a very powerful moment. Now, people have argued over this, whether it was actually sufficiently clear or not that it was being done, but nevertheless it was his intention of the Pope to do that. Now, that's kind of important, because just a little bit later, it was actually about 6 weeks later, something happened. It was, notice the date, the 13th of May. What does that mean? What date is that?
Oh, that's the day when the first saw Mary.
Voila, you got it. It was the beginning of what is concluded on this day, the first of the 6 apparitions. And it's actually that day that we feast as Our Lady of Fatima in the calendar. So, it was a day also important for John Paul II. Do you happen to know what happened on the 13th of May for John Paul II? Not that year, but another year.
No.
You weren't alive, but you may have heard about it from Daddy and Mammy.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have lived, John Paul II, but something awful happened on that very day. Not that year, but another year. Did you ever hear about what happened to him?
No.
Well, he was in... Yes? Daddy will tell you.
He got shot, wasn't it? Yeah.
Got shot.
You shot it.
He's still in prison. Ali Aqsa or somebody, he's still in prison. And the Pope, he was... Anyway, the Pope... There was no hope he was going to live, because it was a very precise instrument he had, and it was clear he meant to get... There was more than one bullet actually, but it was miraculous. We know now it was miraculous. Our Lady intervened. It was, what day was it? It was the 13th of May. Do you see the significance? And it was also disclosed in the year 2000 that that was one of the secrets of Fatima. There was a third part not been revealed. That was part of it. This question of the Pope's assassination. Now, therefore, John Paul II was very much aware of the protection of Blessed Lady of Fatima. Do you know what he did the following 13th of May with the bullet that was in him and that they got out? You wouldn't know that. Well, he went to Fatima and placed it in the crown of Our Lady of Fatima, and it's still there to this day. The bullet is in the crown. So, anyway, to cut a long story short, he was Our Lady's Pope. He took this motto, totus tuus, all yours, meant hers, and she was very much in charge of him. In fact, there's a miraculous picture which shows Our Lady protecting him, Our Lady of Czestochowa, as he's being shot. It seemed to have been somehow taken out of a print. I don't know the details of that, but it seems to be a miraculous picture. It's gone round now since. So anyway, on this 13th of May, 1984, something awful happened. It was picked up on satellites by American intelligence that there was something going on. Now, you wouldn't know this, but it's part of European history that under the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, they had been dumbing down the arms race in America. And they had therefore been trying, for good reasons, to have peace through that. But apparently, it was encouraged by, from what we can understand, the message being given from Russia that they were going to do that. But the point was it actually sincere? Because what actually happened was America had lost a lot of its force at that point, and it was the moment at which Russia could do something if they wanted to. They had an advantage and they knew it. And it was picked up by American intelligence that they were going to do something. And they could see this huge movement of very dangerous nuclear arms going in one direction towards the northern bloc of Russia to make a huge nuclear break of the protection of the umbrella which would protect Europe from that kind of thing, from Russia, in such a way that America could not defend Europe from what Russia could do if it wanted to at that point. Now, what was happening was this. This was all set in place, they could see it, and they could not, at that point, have prevented it. But Our Lady intervened, because on this day, no, the 30th of May, something mysterious went wrong. The whole thing was just, without any human explanation, stopped. All the machinery just wouldn't, it just stopped. There was something which went completely wrong, and immediately the Russians started to change their tone and to talk about entente. It's the kind of expression to have peace and quiet once again. Because it put back the Russians 2 years on the nuclear program. But obviously what happened was this. Our Lady at that point prevented the world from what would have been probably the outbreak of a third world war. Now we are one generation later on, and we don't know what's ahead of us. I just concluded one thing. Some years ago there was an interesting case. It was the case of Howard Storm. He was essentially an intellectual atheist, and he died rather quickly while in Paris. He was taken out of his body like a dead man, and he saw the other side, and he was in trouble. But he was given to understand, he's just dead now, if he tried to remember some prayer or whatever from his childhood. So he started to fumble the Our Father, and eventually he was saved from going under, and he was also shown things and allowed to come back for a second chance. Now he's going around giving his testimony. He's also a very good man. He speaks well. But one thing he was given to understand was this, while he was on the other side, because he was American, that the protection which had been given to America as an officially anyway, Christian nation, was being withdrawn. Can you imagine why? Well, what's going on in America compared with what they were? Are they getting better or worse?
Worse.
Yes, big time. So they're losing the protection of heaven, which actually wanted America to be a Christian nation. And so that means trouble. Should America no longer have protection, it can go off course and bring the whole world with it. So in that wider context, we don't know what's ahead, but we know that heaven is concerned. If Our Lady was appearing in such a dramatic way in Fatima 100 years ago, and she was coming again so many times in history, and if she'd already intervened on the 13th of May 1984 to protect us one time again, what will she be saying now, when massively we're actually going against heaven by voting in awful, awful laws which heaven doesn't want? Is Ireland also perhaps in danger of losing its protection as what had been, after all, a very different nation, where until only a few years ago, massively people still practiced. So, with that, we come down and ask our Blessed Lady at least to protect us, to protect this little family, and also we ask for the grace to do what she asked. Again, what did she ask on a daily basis at Fatima? What was the one thing she repeated 6 times?
Rosary.
The Rosary. It's very important. It's the one thing we can all do, Daddy and Mammy and all the little ones, until we die, 5 decades. We're very pleasing to our Blessed Lady, and if we do, we know that we will be protected. Let's say it well. Always say well the Rosary, not muttering it, but knowing that heaven is very close to us, and the children are very close to heaven. Why? Because they're not contaminated. So don't get contaminated. Keep yourself pure, and pray well, because the children are very powerful in prayer. Virgin most pure, star